Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while, but I'm back with a Boba Cat acrylic paint tutorial, or just kind of like a paint with me today. I basically was cleaning out my craft room and I came across these 16 by 20 inch blank canvases, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna paint today. So I went on YouTube looking for something to paint, and I didn't really find anything that sort of fit the mood that I was in today. I kind of wanted to do something kind of cutesy, but have a tutorial for it. And so I switched from YouTube over to Pinterest and went and looked for different images and came across this adorable Boba Cat and decided I would try and paint it. So if you wanted to paint this Boba Cat, follow along. I thought I'd share some of the tips and kind of like the do's and don'ts that I learned throughout this process. And if you guys enjoyed, let me know and maybe I'll film more of these in the future. So as you can see, I started out using some kind of a masking tape. You can use painter's tape, and I put sort of a border along the entire canvas. And I've done a couple of these in the past where when I painted the edges, some of the paint leaked underneath the border. So I would make sure that I really press the tape down along the side closest to your painting just to make sure nothing leaks where you're painting. And yeah, so I did that, and what that does, it is sort of masks off the border around your painting, and you'll automatically get kind of a white frame after you remove the paint, or when you remove the tape, sorry. So that's been pretty a nice little illusion at the end. So here I am painting or kind of sketching out, sorry, the Boba Cat. And the reference photo I have is actually on an iPad in front of me, so you'll see that my hand reaches out here and there to make sure the screen doesn't disappear. So I'm starting out with just kind of a pencil here, and I'm kind of sketching out based off of my reference photo. I guess since this whole shelter in place in March, I have not had any bubble tea. So I think that partly inspired my search on Pinterest. But you guys can definitely go on Pinterest, look up acrylic paint ideas, do it yourself painting or tutorials, and you'll find a lot of different photos um, that you can kind of reference off of. I'll list down below the supplies that I used, but I'm basically just using acrylic paints, some very basic brushes that I had on hand, and a paper plate to kind of mix my paints. And then I've got a little water jar on the side, which I don't think I show in the video here. But I'm just, yeah, just sketching out right now. And if your sketch isn't perfect, that's totally fine. I did find that you can erase pretty easily on canvas if you sketch lightly in pencil. But the amazing thing about acrylic paints is that it's pretty opaque, and I find that you can kind of mess up and then paint over, as you'll see later on throughout the process. Um, I actually painted the cat brown, but ended up not liking that at all. So you'll see that I paint over the cat entirely and switch out his color. So I'm going to fast forward through the rest of the sketch here. As you can see, I'm just kind of outlining the areas that I want to paint, and we'll, I guess, jump over into the painting portion. Alright, so here's my paper plate that I took out, and I find that these make a great kind of canvas or palette, sorry, to mix the paints on. And yeah, so here I am mixing some paints up. And I think the nice thing about this is after acrylic paint dries, it's basically impossible to take it off or clean off from a palette. So for me, I just like using these paper plates because I can toss them when I'm done. So I started out by painting the cat's sort of patches on his forehead in black paint. And I think after this, I head over to sketch the eyes out in the paint, but I switched brushes here. So yeah, definitely can use any kind of colors that you want. In hindsight, I think if the cat were all white with brown stripes, that could have been pretty cute too. But yeah, I'm just commenting now after the fact. So yeah, the great thing about acrylic paints is you can paint over if you're not happy with how it turned out, and start fresh. Basically, you'll see that I kind of do that throughout the video. And then I did a little triangle nose. I tried to leave a little white spot to signify a highlight. However, I don't think it showed up that well on my painting. But here I am mixing some red and white to create sort of a pink color to do the ears. And so I'm kind of outlining first and then coloring in with my brush, which I think is a good technique for acrylic paints because you can go a little bit faster once you outline the area that you want to paint. So yeah, I'm just mixing some more pink shades and going along here. And for acrylic paints, since they dry up so quickly, and I feel like it's so easy to waste the paint, I try and paint the areas that include that color all at once if I can. So for example, I knew that the ears and the paws would be pink, so I wanted to do that first. Oh, I did notice if you're right-handed, you'll probably want to paint things on the left side first, just because if you paint on the right, it sort of takes up your area to fulcrum or leave, like put your wrist on. And so throughout, you'll notice that I'm kind of like holding my hand up because the paint is now touching my palm. So yeah, if you're right-handed, maybe paint some of the things on the left side first so it can dry while you're painting the right. I don't know. I kind of noticed that was sort of a problem as I was going on. So moving on, I just used some black paint to paint the boba. And if you're not familiar with boba or kind of milk tea, bubble tea type drinks, basically these are little tapioca balls that I painted at the bottom of that little cup. So here I am, you'll see, outlining the cat. And actually, if I were to go back, I definitely would not be doing this step during this part of the painting process. So if you're following along and you're like already outlining, you can definitely follow what I'm doing. But if you're kind of like about to start, I would maybe skip the outlining in black and do that at the end. And the reason for that is when I was painting with the acrylic paint, sometimes I would bleed into the outline, and that didn't look very clean or fresh at the end. So I found myself going back at the very, very end and outlining everything again in black. So it was kind of like a double step. But I guess you can do it either way. It doesn't really matter. But if I were to do it again, I might not outline at this point in time. But I guess I'll fast forward a little bit here through the outlining process. So as I'm outlining here, I figured I would maybe talk about canvas size. The canvas that I found in my room was a 16 by 20 inch canvas, and I think if I were to do this, if this is your first time doing any kind of acrylic paint, I might actually start with the smaller size if you have the option, mainly because I found when you have kind of like a larger canvas, there's more surface area to paint in terms of like the spaces that aren't so detailed. And mixing paints or getting the paints even is a little bit trickier. So maybe if you started with something smaller, it might be a little bit easier in the end. Not super sure, but that's my thoughts looking back right now. Alright, so here I am on this next part starting to mix some paint for the milk tea itself. And I just picked some of this brown and white, trying to create sort of a nice milk tea color. And here I am painting that in. Again, as you can see, since I outline, I have to be very careful around the lines that I already painted, and I think around this point is when I'm realizing, oh, I probably should have painted the outlines at the end. So for example, the little bobas or tapioca balls that you see here, I have to very carefully go around each one, and probably would have been a lot easier if I just added in the balls at the end. So if you already added your tapioca balls in, totally fine. You can even paint over them now, because at the end, if you go over all the lines again with black paint, you're totally fine. So you can take your time or kind of go a little bit faster. But also I find when I'm trying to kind of work around lines, my brush strokes start to get really choppy. And so I probably would have achieved a slightly smoother paint by just doing it all at once instead of working around the little tapioca balls at the bottom. So after painting it in, I decided to use a darker brown to outline the liquid inside of the drink here. So you can see I'm holding my wrist because the paint is still wet below, and I didn't want to like smudge it with my palms. So that's what's going on in this scene. And yeah, I guess you could definitely wait for the paint to dry, but I'm usually so excited to get the paint going that I just, do these weird things. So that's that. So here I am painting the cat, and I start out with this sort of brownish color. It's almost like a burnt orange / brown. And if you clicked on the video, you would have seen that the cat was actually gray. And so I actually might fast forward through all this. I paint the whole cat in this brown color, and then at the end decide I don't really love the color at all. So that's why you might be confused why the cat is brown, but it's because I started with this brown color. Another tip I wanted to kind of say while this is fast forwarding through was that if you're painting a large section on your canvas, I would highly recommend using a color that's already mixed as opposed to mixing your own, mainly because acrylic paints dry so quickly, and unless you do a very large batch, which potentially wastes a lot of paint, your mixture might not be the exact same shade if you go back to it at the end. So that was just one thing that I noticed. This is one specific color, unfortunately a color I didn't love, but a little tip that I noted while painting. Alright, so here I am painting kind of the shadow underneath the cat. And I didn't really want to use a black color, so I added a little bit of white, like a touch of white, to make it this sort of dark gray shade. And basically, this is kind of the cat's shadow underneath him. And I decided I wanted to paint him on top of like a table, so he's like sitting on a table, drinking his bubble tea. So that's kind of the thought process behind it. Yeah, so he's looking pretty cute, but as you can see, the brown color that I used was very splotchy on the face, and I just wasn't loving it. But either way, I found this yellow color that I'll link all the colors specifically down below if you wanted to do this exact same thing. But I took a larger brush, which I highly recommend if you're going to do a background, to keep the brush strokes really smooth. I really like this very flat, thick brush. And yeah, I decided to just go ahead and add some to my plate here and paint the background. So I guess I'll just let that one go for now without too many words. Alright, back to painting the cup here. I sort of mixed the like a aqua turquoise color with white, and I got this really cute light blue sort of color, and I decided that would contrast the pink really nicely. Actually, initially I wanted this to be the background color, but I didn't think it would match nicely with this cat color that I chose initially. But I guess if I knew I was going to repaint the cat, maybe I would have done it a little differently. So I guess that's a nice thing about acrylics. You can always repaint if you want, but in the end I was pretty happy with how it turned out. So let's see oh, at this point I decided I wanted to add some like highlights or accents to my bubble tea drink, and I think on the cat's ear. So using white over dried paint to add these accents in. And I'm actually using, if you're wondering what I'm holding, the lid of the paint to dip my brush into. I guess like if you don't want to keep wasting a lot of paint and you're just doing kind of a small section, you can just shake your acrylic paint and then unscrew the cap and use that instead. Alright, so at this point I decided I am not loving the cat color and switched over to a light gray. So I basically took a little bit of black paint, mixed it with some white paint, and I did it in larger scale on the paper plate, and yep, painted over the brown. And like I was saying, acrylic paint is great. If you mess up, you can very easily add on top as long as the paint below it is dry. So here I am just kind of repainting my cat, and I was so happy that I did this because for some reason this gray came out so much smoother than the brown that I had underneath. I just had to be careful around the lines, but I already had in my mind that I was going to re-outline everything, so it wasn't a big deal if things were starting to disappear. As you can see on the left side of the cat's face, his outline was disappearing because my gray paint was getting a little sloppy, but I wasn't worried because you'll see soon that I paint over it. Alright, so the end is near. I guess after all of your paint is on, you can take out your black paint and outline your image. If this is your first time outlining, since you saved it towards the end, then have fun. But if you're kind of going over your lines, I would just make sure everything is as smooth as possible. You'll notice that some of my lines get a little bit thicker just because I'm trying to cover some of the old lines and some of the paint that got messed up. So, but you know, in the end, it turned out okay. So I found this part to be really relaxing because I was just kind of slowly taking my time, painting through, making sure the lines were coming together really nicely, and I started to see my image progress in a very nice, clean fashion. So I was really happy at this point in time. Again, if you are painting and you're right-handed, I would probably outline the left of the image first so that you don't have to hover your arm over like I am. But you know, you live and you learn. So here I am just outlining. So I'll put on some music and let the video play on. So just adding the final touches of the bubble tea paint, and really happy how everything's turning out. At this part, I mix some pink and white paint to add some details of like cheeks on his face. And I think the paint underneath wasn't completely dry, which is why this pink paint isn't showing up as vibrantly. But I was just too excited to get going, so that's just how it was for my painting. But if you have a little bit more patience, I would wait until the layers underneath are dry. You'll get a slightly nicer final product. And to add some detail, I added these small black dots for freckles, and that's basically my cat. For the final reveal, slowly peel back your tape and check out those beautiful borders. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I know this is something totally different on my channel, and I'm not really sure if I'll continue on. If you guys enjoyed this and want to see more videos, painting videos, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll look up maybe something else to draw or paint in the future. Yeah, but thanks so much for painting with me, and I guess if you do a Boba Cat, please tag me on Instagram at Beauty by Starlet. I would love to see your creations. Alright, hopefully you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.